I've seen where, like, we go to a meetup on Drift Week, and I've seen, I've seen Chelsea DeNofa fucking street drift down a hill, like in the middle of Oregon, It's like, is that a takeover? I've seen the Drift Week guys ripping donuts like a historical monument, stuff like that. It's like, where do you draw the line?
Welcome back to the Circle of Drift podcast presented by Sim HQ. My name is Dawson, and today we are back at the home studio, actually, with Lucas.
I'm a cheap guy, right? I don't buy the right parts. I do everything wrong, but I'm good at doing everything wrong. I even tried spool gun welding it back together. Me and my buddy exploded my whole oil pan in my face one time. It was great. But I feel like grassroots, like the best drivers are Texas and Northern California.
They get down.
Oh, they absolutely do,
And we have so much more to go over. So, of course, look below the video and make sure the subscribe button is pressed. And without further ado, let's get into the podcast.
I've been wanting this shit forever. I've been in the field with whatever they throw at me. Brush it off, pick myself up, moving on to the better. Hey. Ain't no errors, baby. It's a new era.
Today we got Lucas. So, how are you doing today? And, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Good, man. Just stoked to be here. I'm from Northern California, but we're on this big trip we've been doing around the country, and we're coming through Tennessee, so I gave you a shout and thought it'd be super cool to come by because I've watched a lot of episodes and had friends on episodes and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm Northern California, like I said, and yeah, I've been drifting for 8 years. I got a bunch of different cars. I drive a lot. My Instagram's Uncle Seat Time. I consider myself kind of the king of seat time and the budget king kind of. I'd like to tell people I get the most seat time per dollar kind of anybody, I would argue, and I kind of stand behind that for the most part. But also we have a pretty newly opened drift academy in Northern California. We call NorCal Drift Academy. So we've been opening that up and teaching kids and, kids, adults, men, women, everybody. Been trying to get as many people driving as we can and show them a good time and kind of get them addicted to the sport that we all love.
Absolutely.
And another one of my, claims to fame, whatever you want to call it, is it sounds bad when you say it this way, but we kind of have one of the country's biggest illegal street toges. The legal toges are becoming.
Oh, we're gonna talk about that.
Yeah,
we'll get to it. Don't worry.
The legal toges have become a big thing, but we have I'd argue one of the coolest street scenes out in California. What we're doing out there, so it's a pretty good time.
What a title to have, I guess, right?
I guess it's kind of self-proclaimed. A lot of the local guys, on the scene always know, and they always want to come out to our spots and stuff like that, and it's kind of becoming a thing. But yeah, it's a pretty incredible experience that we have going on up there. It's kind of hard to explain without seeing.
Well, I got some questions for you, so we'll get into that in a bit. But right now you're on this long trip too with the boys. So tell me a little bit about this. What are y'all even out doing?
The trip with the boys. So it's me, my brother. We've been planning this for a while, and it got inspired actually from our dad, who he unfortunately passed away a couple years ago. But we were really close with our father.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. Grew up riding motorcycles, all that stuff. Huge motorcycle family, and we in his safe, and when he passed away, we found this old notebook. And it was like a journal from him and his friends, and they took a cross-country trip back in 1976. And it was, him and two other buddies, and they had a old Chevy van and a Ford Galaxy, and they toured the whole country, and they'd take turns writing down, like, what happened, each day and all the stuff they did, places they went, and they'd even have other people they met along the way write stuff in there. And we were thought it was just the coolest thing ever, and, to be able to do a trip like that while we're still young enough and, still don't have, too many obligations to be able to pull something off like that. So we decided to do our own trip. We got a toy hauler. We got 4 dirt bikes in the bed of our truck. We got a toy hauler with 3 stand-up jet skis in it. And we've just been making our rounds. We kind of bombed straight to Louisiana. One of our other good friends flew in, met us in Louisiana. And, we did Bourbon Street. We did a fan boat tour, couple cool things like that, and then we jetted off to Florida, went down to the Keys, jet skied in the Florida Keys in the ocean for the first time. That was super cool. I ended up sinking my jet ski, which I unfortunately do all the time. It's kind of a normal thing, but the salt water really kind of made that one sting a little bit worse.
Wait, why with the salt
water?
It's just bad on the motor.
Oh yeah, just corrodes, rust. And we're from California. That's been a big thing too. We're out on the East Coast where everything's so rusty. We're from California. We're spoiled. Nothing's rusty. Everything is awesome and dry. And all the cars are, we see a car that's a little bit rusty, and we're like, oh my god, that's crazy. But
it's
yeah, so
here.
the salt water is just super, super hard on stuff, especially jet skis and
Yeah.
But yeah, so did the Florida thing. That was super cool. Unfortunately, motocross track wise, we were trying to stop as many tracks as we can. And Florida's kind of like drifting, Southern California and Florida are kind of like the two meccas, I would say. And for motocross, it's almost the exact same thing, Florida and Southern California. But we got rained out. We didn't realize how bad the weather is on the East Coast. We're spoiled with our California weather too. But we got rained out for a couple of different tracks. The front of our trailer is a rental from our dirtbag buddy, and we've have it like Simpson strong tie straps holding the front together and gorilla taped, and it's a mess. So it's leaking on us, all kinds of good stuff. And so we got rained out at a couple different tracks. We got to hit actually, have you heard of Swamp Fest?
I have.
So
I think
we end up at this track in North
familiar.
Florida, and I'm like walking in the back.
Oh, yes, I just watched a video on that the other day.
And I see like a concrete skate park, and I'm like, what's going on here? And I see a bunch of BMX dirt jumps, and I pull up the Google map, and there's a bunch of wood skate park features on the Google map, and I'm like, there's no way. And I Googled, I'm like, where's Swamp Fest? And it's like Waldo Motorsports Park. And we're like, no way, how cool is that? So we ended up there, got to ride there for a day, and then we shot up the coast, got through the Carolinas and Virginia and all that, got rained out. It was pretty much raining the whole time, which is kind of a bummer. Ended up shooting straight up to Massachusetts to my buddy Louie's house, which Louie is a whole nother story in itself. I met him on the first Drift Week we ever did, Drift Week 3, and Louie was kind of almost infamous from that trip because he was just a wild dude, but an awesome dude. And I hadn't seen him since then. It's been like 5 years, but we always stayed in touch. And so we got to his house, and he has drift cars and a big old paved driveway. So we were ripping laps through his driveway all day, and my brother and buddy were getting to drive, and it was a super good time to see him.
By the way, which drift weeks did you do?
I've done 3, 4, 6, 7, and 10.
Jesus
I've done 5.
Christ.
I've done a lot. And also, I'd argue nobody's done a drift week for as cheap as I've done. Like by a long shot. I can do a drift week for like $5 to $7 grand.
Explain it.
And the last one was my 87 octane fuel and used tires. Not a single new tire was put on my car.
How did you obtain those?
So I brought a giant trailer, so it's single axle, probably 12, 13 foot deck aluminum trailer with a bunch of used tires and wheels. Even all my buddies used tires and wheels and parts and stuff too, because we had 2 C7s with us. So I had all their stuff. And a bunch of used tires, and then, good old kind of Brandon Wicknick style, just going through the Volino scrubs pile and picking and choosing the ones I liked.
All of them came from that.
My car's also really good on tires. It's pretty incredible. So my C7 buddies, mainly Skip, he'll blow he runs Perguillas pretty much, because Perguillas are, in my opinion, Kendas and Perguilla and Volino Perguillas are the two best. Pergia, I don't know. We always say Perguillas, I don't know. But
it's always confused me.
Yeah.
So anyway,
I feel
sorry.
We're always with the Volino guys. I think Mike always says Perguillas. I don't know, whatever. But those, those are the two some of the best tires in my opinion. And Skip will run those. He'll get 10, 15 laps on a C7, a Pro Charge C7, and he'll take them off. Which basically bald. 5% maybe, pretty much bald. But the outsides of those usually last a little longer. And I'll run those on my car for 30, 40 laps. And they're bald. It's pretty insane with decent amount of grip too. It's pretty wild.
How the fuck?
And my car, it does even on used tires, because I'm a used tire.
You just stock power though, right?
So it's S14 with a stock 6 liter, stock tune, stock.
That's crazy,
everything.
Actually.
And but it's and with the S10 transmission, it's kind of a weird. Kind of lowish wheel speed, I'd say, just kind of torques around, and I
guess that is true.
It works well, but it does phenomenal on tire usually, which is pretty nice.
So you said how much overall for Drift Week? It was $5 or $6 grand.
Yeah, because back it used to be cheap. It was cheaper back in the day. It used to be $2 grand to do it. Now that's $3 grand now, whatever, somewhere around there. And and then so back in the day, I'd usually buy probably $300 to $1,000 in tires from Volino. To on the trip, because they roll with you, and provide your tires. And the first Drift Week, I was uber prepared because I had my stock Z back then. I took that, and that was stock suspension, no coilovers. But I had years in the car. I could drive the car at a high level still somehow. But and actually that was the first time I ever put a brand new tire on the rear of my car in my life ever for drifting. I put some 215 Kendas on, and I thought my car was broken because and I'm like, what is going on?
Oh, way too much grip at that point.
Villains. And I put a used 16 on it in the back, and I'm like, oh no, it's not broken, it's just different. And so that was the whole learning experience there, because I was pretty deep into drifting at that point, but I was still just super budget, kind of shitty car.
So you just like camp in places? Like, what is the
no? So
the
Airbnbs always come out to, if you have a passenger, it's usually only like $500 for the whole trip, because you have your Airbnb group. There's 5 cars, which 10 people.
Okay.
And then so you split it all up. So the Airbnbs really aren't that bad. I remember the first drift week, because I'm a huge budget guy. I'm about as cheap as they come. I remember telling Aaron, like, hey, can we just camp? Like, da-da-da. And he's like, oh, no, that's not allowed, whatever. I'm like, all right, whatever. But because that trip, I had a pretty good size enclosed trailer behind my Z that was probably, 6 feet by 10 feet, single axle enclosed. And I had an engine in there. Sorry, I didn't have an engine. I brought an engine on the other trailer that I towed to park for the initial meetup. But I had a transmission, diff, axles, full sets of tools, probably 6 pairs of wheels, another probably 4 pairs of used tires.
Putting in work.
So I had tons of used tires with me to make it work. And yeah. So,
dude, that's insane. All right, so what are some like little tricks that you've picked up along the way since you've done so many drift weeks that people don't really say?
I mean, it's just having a car that holds together, because I've been super, and my whole career, like, and considering I'm a cheap guy, right? I don't buy the right parts. I do everything wrong, but I'm good at doing everything wrong, kind of. So
what the fuck does that mean?
It's weird. I can try to explain more once we start talking about parts and cars, because I have very differing opinions, I feel like, from most drifters, but because it's like the first drift week I did, I brought pretty much an entire spare Z, even though it's a stock car. I just wanted to be prepared, and an entire spare Z, and I spent like $1.50 on a brake line fitting. That was the only thing I had to buy, because again, my car's super ghetto.
It's gotta feel pretty good at least,
my e-brake lines for my dual caliper setups, they're hard line from the master cylinder all the way to the calipers, and it's $20 in parts from AutoZone, and I get a flare tool and I make the whole thing myself, and it's $20. And if I break a line, I just make another one.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, and it's super ghetto, like, but it works.
I'm not gonna knock it if it fucking works, dude. So just having a car that is operable,
and that's even and
everything else falls
I'm a big fan of stock, OEM as possible usually, but then even like my 240, it's a swapped car with a kind of an oddball swap too, but there's still stock like swap parts kind of, but in even that thing, it's just built with every corner cut kind of possible, cheapest parts, and people are always just like, how does that thing just keep going, And
why'd you decide to build that car in the first place, the 240?
Because my first drift car was an S14, a Zenki 240, and ended up selling it after I rebuilt the dual cam and then blew it up again. Ended up selling it, and then I got a Z, and then I just got a good deal from my buddy. It was a real 98 too. It's like the kind of sad. It's pretty smashed up now, like real smashed up, but real 98, and had like all the glass broken out of it. Had a knocking dual cam auto in it, and I paid $900 for it. So I was like, perfect. I've been driving my Z for years, could drive it, pretty close to its limit. And I was like, I'm ready to build a cool car, which I also always preach to people. I see tons of kids that they just go, oh, I want to build this, get into drifting. I want to build this car. And I'm like, don't. Buy a stock G35 or Z, drive that. And while you're driving that and having the time of your life, then build some car in your garage. It's going to take you 3 years, and build your cool car, which is kind of how I did it. And I think it's, it's the best option for sure. But so I was like, all right. And then my brother, actually, he had the 6-liter. We pulled it out of a 02 Escalade, and he put it into his S10, like a 99 S10, which was kind of cool because you can do it that way with those transmissions, the MV3500s, where it's still from the bell housing back, it was a completely factory S10, but it has a 6-liter in it.
So
and then he ended up getting a Firebird with a LST56 and putting that whole swap in there. So he's like, I'll sell you the whole swap for $1,500, put in your car. It's like perfect. Didn't even have to unmate the transmission. I guess I did when I was mocking everything up.
Right.
But yeah, so super, cheap setup. And those transmissions, they bolt to an LS, no adapter kit, $400. It's just super fun. And they're becoming more popular. And almost want to not make them popular. When stuff gets popular,
get the prices
then
down.
the price goes up. But yeah, so that was kind of the whole inspiration behind that build. And it all worked good. And like I said, I built that car for, including the price of the car, like $4,000. And it's like I've won grassroots comps with that thing, series, like done 3 drift weeks with it now, with that car specifically. It's been through a lot. And keeps
now I
going.
know S chassis are ungodly expensive now, but if someone had one and they were trying to do a budget swap like that, what is the guidelines that someone should stay within in order to do that at the cost that you did?
I mean,
is it literally just doing every little thing yourself?
Kind of, and I'm not even like a good fabricator, but so I have a whole YouTube video on my YouTube's not that big or anything, but I did make like a kind of build breakdown on my car specifically like a while back. But the main saving things are LS swap headers suck because they're the steering shaft and they're a pain to put on and off. So I had some stock manifolds, a stock truck manifold fits on the passenger side perfectly, and the driver's side one I literally just hacked up into the header banks as far as I could, stuck like a 3-bolt muscle car stainless steel flange up in there, tacked it on, brought it to the welder at the local truck shop, and he just pizza pied pieces in there till it's sealed. And that thing, it's nasty looking. Ew. And it's broken. That's the number one thing. It's probably broken on my car, but it'll break and just have an exhaust leak. And actually this last drift week too, and a little bit before that, I had issues with it hitting my steering shaft and causing me some binding issues and little stuff like that. Nothing that kept me from driving too much, but little issues here and there. But I can take my manifold out in like 10 minutes.
That's good.
And it's free. Versus $500 swap.
Free-ish.
Versus $500 swap headers.
That is true. Okay, so you are saving a lot of money there.
A lot of money, and the transmission, obviously, that's where stuff always gets expensive. Adapter kits are super expensive, so transmission, huge savings. You got to bite the bullet on like an oil pan. I tried going the cheap route on an oil pan, and it was like an
Why'd that
aluminum
not
one
work?
from eBay. It was like cracked off the get-go kind of, and I even tried spool gun welding it back together. Me and my buddy exploded my whole oil pan in my face one time. It was great. But because we were cleaning out with brake clean and then welding and
oh Jesus,
it was pretty bizarre. I still don't understand how it happened, but yeah. So then you got to bite the bullet on the oil pan, kind of. You got to bite the bullet on a custom drive shaft usually. So the couple $400 or $500 parts you got to buy, but other than that, it's like I got a truck manifold, truck accessories, super basic.
What about the motor mounts and stuff?
They're the orange ones, the orange, 240, the same ones that people use for everything.
Like the ISR ones?
Yeah.
Yeah. They're like a yellow orange.
Yeah, they're orange, have the black, spacers, however many you want to stack. Just the ones that the poly ones that people use for dual cams and SRs and everything pretty much. And then it's conversion. So the conversion mounts are eBay ones that are like $100, which actually finally broke last year. It like blew the whole tabs completely off of them, and my motor fell on my steering rack, and actually my oil pan's dented super bad from the steering rack.
I believe it.
And that locked my steering. I was at Sonoma on Winter Jam. We were jamming all day, and finally, as soon as I entered, my steering just locked and backed off. My buddy with the C7 hit me pretty hard, which that's always sucks.
A C7?
Yeah, okay. So this C7 too. My buddy Skip, it was mint 20,000 mile C7 Grand Sport.
Because I just had Tommy Lemaire on from FD, and he drives a C7. Okay. So we talked a little bit about the chassis and stuff. Yeah,
because I'm pretty intimately knowledgeable with the C7 now. I just got one actually too.
You said that.
Yeah, and then my other buddy, he just built his whole. He took it on the last drift week too, but he just took a wrecked one, made it mint, and then made it a drift car, and now is going to destroy it. But so we have a lot of feedback, and actually drift week 7. I rode with Skip, and he just let me drive it half the time, which was super cool.
That's obviously rad.
Yeah, so a lot of knowledge. The electric steering racks are like the biggest downfall of those, I would say. Once you put PBM stuff on them, they kind of like to burn out pretty quick because I think they get overworked a little bit and kind of wig out. But Skip had this mint 20,000 mile Grand Sport. He traded his grandma for his nice Jeep or something. and he wanted to get into drifting because I used to drift with his little cousin who also unfortunately passed away, and got into it finally, and you know, and I drifted with him. That was always, you know, me and Skip, because, you know, it's our buddies, you know, trying to make events and stuff. But Skip was just always at events and could always make all the events I did because we drive together a lot, you know, almost like at least every other weekend. Yeah, this thing. And I was always like I'm like, I don't want to hit. I remember when I first started drifting, I'm like, tandem with C6 has stressed me out. You know, I'm like, I'm not trying to, you know, ruin someone's nice car if I can help it. But the C7 was like, I don't want to touch that thing. But, like, you know, and get real close to it. But I was like, I don't want to be the one, you know, because a regular car, you know, put door marks on it, whatever. Not too big a deal. We like super aggressive driving, you know. But I was like, I'm not going to mess up the C7. But then a couple other people started hitting it. And, you know, he didn't care. You know, I'm in the front of lines throwing thumbs up for like 10-car trains. And he's right behind me and he doesn't care. So, you know, stuff happens.
My God,
and
that's
he's basically
ballsy.
just following me into any situation, which, you know, always gets a little sporty. And so that thing, now it's pretty haggard. It's been smashed up. And we actually, Drift Week 7, we had to go get a steering rack from the dealership in SoCal. And we pull up to the dealership and, like, everyone's just looking at us like, what is this thing? Like, what is this smashed to pieces C7 straight pipe pulling up in here, you know? But, yeah, so I think it's due for a refresh.
On the steering though, what rack did you say y'all put in it? Since it's electric,
it's still electric. We just
you still use that?
$1,800 from dealership. Another electric steering rack goes through about one a year.
Why not just convert it to something else?
'Cause
like a C6 rack or something.
Yeah, that's probably, you know, in the works. Hopefully, you know.
I don't know. We're just fucking doing it.
I'll just get another one, you know. Just get a new one, replace it. It'll be good for another year. That's how it works.
Be good for another year.
We did talk about the C6 rack, and now that my buddy Ori, he has one now, and he's like the builder. Like, he's the one, he caged my car, and he builds like you know, I swap cars and build stuff, but I'm a hack.
You're a hackist.
I'm a super ultra hack, you know, but with really good luck somehow. I don't know.
You sure about that?
You know,
I've been
hacking stuff since I was really young, so maybe I just got better at it. I don't know. But I like, you know, push the limits of people. They say, oh, don't do this. This will never work. And I'm like, I think you're just saying that.
I still got to try it.
And I'm usually right most of the time. I'd like to think. But Ori is like a super, super good builder. Like, he's a Toyota guy, mainly came from rock crawling, but got him into the drifting thing. And he'll build like, you know, like a 93 Toyota pickup and swap a 3.4 into it and swap the Tacoma dash and air conditioning and bar and ref it and like builds like nice stuff. So now he built his whole C7. So, and that's like actually one thing with the C7s too is the PBM kits, the bottom like uniball, you know, for that goes to the bottom of the knuckle will just shear off like 4 times up at Affinity Circuit. Skip's sheared off and he's just stuck in the middle of the track, barely even get a jack under the car. And so
I understand, like, I work with FDF, but like consider FDF,
yeah,
because they've put a lot of engineering into that kit. I think it's on the market.
Yeah, that's just, and Skip's been driving that car for like probably 4 years now, so that was the only thing available back then, you know. And but they ended up, you know, they're big off-road guys, so he just welded, you know, a new piece to the lower to actually take like a big RK Heim, like a nice Heim, not like the cheesy, you know, stuff that they use. So that they fixed that problem. But yeah, that's the only other real issue I've had with those cars. But then they work. They're cool. It's a good time.
What about the aluminum chassis part of it? Does that ever come into effect with how like simple of a build it really is?
Not too much. I mean, I know he had Drift Cave put a cage in his, and you know, you got to actually bolt the cage in instead of weld it and stuff. And the cage bolts like to drag on the ground and stuff when you're going off track. But
it's just extra sparks.
Yeah,
you know, it looks cool.
Yeah, but no, they're still pretty. Like I said, Ori's car, you know, you pretty much just need to angle on it, and you know, Skip was inline forever. He finally just went dual caliper, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Oh, so actually, the electronic diffs. That's a weird thing because like a C6 LSD works awesome. You know, it's just a regular mechanical, you know, posi kind of LSD. But C7s, anything that's not a base model, which base models are actually wet sump, which is weird because all the other ones are dry sump. Base models are wet sump, and they have an old school posi, but they're weaker. They like to break. But anything like Z51 and up has an electronic locking diff. And this is where like Skip never even messed with his and always just kind of got him by. But you would notice with like tighter kind of stuff, it would kind of want to open up more.
Mm.
And but he always just sent it, and it worked good enough. But like Ori's car when he first built it, it was like noticeably like bad and like opening up. And that's because, once you start deleting stuff and all the StabiliTrak goes off, it kind of wigs out. But he ended up, Ori's the man, so he tears it apart, and he finds it's an electronic pump going to like a solenoid that's pumping hydraulic fluid into this locker on one side of the diff that's like hydraulically controls it, and there's a gauge on the dash that tells you your locking percentage. And he had wired up a switch pro to where, and it's like a pulsing signal that changes it, so he wired up a switch pro to where you could like get it to pulse and kind of keep it locked. But he eventually found there's like one company that makes an aftermarket C7 posi, and they will only like sell you the whole diff, but he got them to send him just the locker and installed it himself, which led to that actually.
How much did that cost for just the locker?
I think like $1,500. And then he put it into an old, because he had a couple parts cars, put it into an old diff housing with kind of suspect gears because it was blown up. And on Drift Week 7 actually, or Drift Week 10, this last one, we were hitting Ridge Motorsports Park, the big giant road course, and it started humming by the end of the second day. And so in Medford, he had our other buddy coming up bring him the factory diff, and he pulled the whole diff out and swapped the gears in like 3 hours in someone else's lift. And it's just,
dude, cowboy. All right.
Oh yeah, he's about it. He's a savage for sure.
That's crazy. I'm excited to see what happens with those chassis. I think they're gonna start growing here soon. Is the diff situation still pretty complicated to replace? Like, is it still
it's probably worse. It's probably worse than a C6.
Oh, how bad? Like, why?
It's just they're packed in there. I mean, you just got to drop the subframe.
Oh, so it's still all kind of the same thing.
Yeah, it's super similar. The C7 diff's just bigger, and it's got got a diff cooler.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So he made it look easy. I haven't really had to mess with them yet. I've done my C6, a bunch of stuff like that, but no, I think it's a good chassis. But I still think a C6 is better stock because like my C6 is bone stock. Like it literally has FDF mini mantis. That's it. Stock handbrake, leaf springs, and that car is a riot, and it will outdrive my 240 10-fold.
So okay, then let me ask you this, because when I interviewed TJ Hunt, he said that the C6 is like screw getting a Z, screw getting all of the C6 is the new starter chassis.
If you can afford
it. Would you agree? Okay, so that was the big misconception that I saw in a lot of the comments from you guys, was that still not there yet, just because
a Z's
cost
$2,000,
way
a C6
too much.
Is
$2,000 is a stretch, maybe for a shell, but
out in Cali.
Cali, yeah. I guess we're talking about Cali.
Yeah,
they're dumb cheap out there.
Yeah, $1,000, $1,500. You just get some kid with a misfire and convince him it's about to blow up, and give him $1,000 for it.
I need to get a Z and just keep it out there so I can come fly out and drive.
And then the G's are usually cheaper too, especially you get one that's rear-ended a little bit or something, perfect like that. Because, and like that's even like I remember one day I got a G for $1,000, I think, or maybe $800, and the dude's like, oh, stop running, I get there, and between the throttle body and the MAF, the boot right there, the rubber boot's ripped. I'm like, oh, that's why I don't run. Didn't even try. I got home, fired it up, and it was still misfiring pretty bad, but it was so low on oil. Like put like 2 quarts in it, and the misfire went away. Like that's how low it was.
Oof.
And then I took the car out. We went out streeting that night to our good spot, and that thing was 100% OEM G35, stock handbrake, stock LSD, stock everything, not an aftermarket part on the car. And I had the best time that night, just shredding that thing,
just boating it around.
Oh yeah, putting it on, and people couldn't even catch me in that thing, stock suspension, that little squat to it, I think it would just take off. But and it was actually the test drive to sell it to one of my buddies too, and by the end of the night the throwout bearing locked up and exploded the fins off the pressure plate, so it was just stuck engaged, so I was just floating gears all the way home. And but my buddy still sold to him with a transmission, and he still drives it. It's all it's still a good car. But yeah, the G's are great, man.
Z's and G's are incredible.
And to be able to take a car, like I said, OEM like that, not as it came off the showroom floor. And like the LSDs are the worst parts of those cars, I'd argue, because most of the LSDs don't work good. But that one worked good enough to get by.
Good enough.
And then at least you can weld them. It's an LSD that you can weld. So
I have an auto open diff in mine, and it's been welded for God knows how long.
Yep.
Now probably 6-7 years total of driving, and stout still.
Yeah, and that's nice because I should
probably knock on wood. That was probably dumb as fuck to say.
Because I run Z diff in my S14 too, because it's $60 for conversion bushings, so it's like no brainer. But yeah, I think mine's an auto open one too. Got the 330 gear ratio.
Fuck yeah.
350.
Yo, dude, when's your first event? Huh? I think it's in 2 weeks, something like that. But dude, have you even ordered tires yet? Oh my God, you're right. Dude, thanks for that reminder. I gotta do that. Yeah, no problem, man. Have you tried the Zeknovas yet? I mean, I've been tossing around the idea of doing that, but I think realistically I'm just gonna buy some cheap Walmart tires like I usually do. No, okay. No, we're not doing that. You've had plenty of seat time by now. You need proper tires. But what do you mean proper tires? Well, what I mean by proper tires is like better grip, more consistency, longer life, and as weird as it sounds, even smells better. But bro, they're so much more expensive. No. Just use the Circle of Drift code. It's like 20% off. Yo, wait, really? But what do I do for the next event? Well, then just use it again. I mean, you can literally use it all season if you want. Well, shit, you ain't gonna tell me twice. I'm gonna do that. Same goes for you, too. If you're looking to get your tires before the first event, maybe it's coming up quick, drop down below to the link to Zeknova Tires and use the code CircleOfDrift to get 20% off.
Well, tell me about the NorCal scene. Is it any different from SoCal, or is it like
it's
vast
very different.
difference?
I like my new thing I've just kind of thought is, my personal opinion, obviously I'm biased, but I feel like grassroots, like the best drivers are Texas and Northern California. Because there's, like, you go to one of like a grassroots series in Northern
I'd agree
California,
with Texas. I just don't know a bunch of NorCal
drivers. Are savage for sure. Because Lone Star, like, those boys.
They get down.
Oh, they absolutely do, And I'm a huge, I'm a driving instructor. I judge people's driving in like a positive way. I love going to an event and like, seeing like someone I don't even know and I'm like, that guy can drive. Like, just by watching, you're like, that guy can drive. And but yeah, so NorCal is good. There's like, you go to a local comp and the top 8 is like, you're like, how do you judge these battles? Like, they're so close and so dialed in. And there's a really, really good scene in NorCal between like Sacramento and the Bay Area. There's tons of good drivers and it's pretty much a really healthy environment. There's always, drama and politics and all that good stuff, whatever.
Like everywhere.
But, or just a bunch of, children. But, yeah, there's tons of good drivers, tons of good people. And, yeah, man, and then on top of that, because there's kind of that, and then started our own little scene, because I'm from a pretty small town, maybe 15,000 people, kind of up in the mountains, a little more just above Sacramento. And within that, I've kind of started our own little scene. We have probably 15 to 25 drivers just up there, which is quite a bit for a small town like that, And that's because of our whole street scene where, kids are like, oh, I don't even got to go to the track. I just buy a car and go in the mountains with the boys, and I can, drive all night for the price of fuel. And it's like, why would I ever go to a track?
True.
But so there's I have my kind of my track friends, and then there's the crossover. A lot of my friends, I'll try to push them to go to the track, because no matter how much you drive in the rain in the street, a dry track is still going to be a different ball game. It translates quite a bit, but it's definitely different. But yeah, so I got my whole group of friends that are my track friends, which we're always competitors too most of the time, because we're all always the ones competing against each other. But and then I got all my local boys, which I love to try to get them to go out to events whenever I can. It's cool if we can get a group of us.
Is that kind of what the driving school is for, to kind of bridge that gap? Or
no, the driving school is more for people that don't really, my boys. It's like, and I started off, teaching my friends, like, yeah, grab a car, follow, and come with me. Like, if you want to do some,
yeah, just grab one of those out back. Let's go.
Or like buy your own car. Don't use my car. But, buy your own car, and I'll tell you what to do to it, and you follow me into the mountains, and,
Why the mountains to start off?
Because, I've never seen a car towed from the woods. Even if the cops come and mess with you, they're not going to take, down in the city, they'll take your car for the most part.
Oh, okay, I see what you mean.
So, and we're kind of in a rural area, but we're still a city. But if we're, we're 45 minutes to an hour, we can get to like some pretty remote places.
So this is for the driving school?
No.
You do this for, okay. So this is just when you started teaching your buddies.
Got it. Okay, my bad. The driving school is all closed course. down in the city.
I was
in
about to say, there's
Sacramento.
no fucking
No,
way.
this is like, but this is kind of how it started. Was me like teaching my friends how to drive by just, in the streets, kind of. But the driving school is all closed course. Rental cars. It's more for someone that doesn't know how to get into it, doesn't even know, starting from scratch mostly. But we also have kids that can drive, or a lot of even like kind of the sideshow scene kids that think they know how to drive. And you come and throw them.
Poor kids.
I have a lot to say about that too, kind of, because it's some funny stories.
We'll get to that.
Yeah.
Because I've got some questions for that as well.
But yeah. So where was I with that? Yeah. So more for people to just kind of come get their feet wet. See if they want to get their own car, that kind of thing, and then they can also bring their own car and have us kind of grill them.
Where is this normally at?
It's in Sacramento, California.
What track? Like, is it always at one track?
It's actually, I'll give my sponsor book here, dude. One of my first and only sponsors, Cali Custom Alignments out of Sacramento. They and they're automotive. They do all kinds of stuff now too. Mainly custom suspension and stuff like that. But it was the first, like when I built my S14 and got arms and stuff. It's like, okay, this is the guy to go to that will actually touch aftermarket stuff, and give you a drift alignment. And so me and him became real close. His name's Jersey. He's actually from New Jersey originally. But, so became really close with him over the years. And he's always supported me and a couple of my other team guys. And, kind of, he always had, big visions and stuff. And we kind of had the vision together, trying to do a drifting school thing. And finally got a shop that, had a lot that would support it and stuff. And finally, able to make it come to fruition finally and make it happen. And it's been...
So it's all like on your own business property?
Yeah.
So no track needed. It's all that's
track.
That's crazy. Hell yeah.
And we're working. Not this location they're at isn't their lease is up in a couple months, and they got we're always trying to find a new spot. I think they got a new spot locked in that should be even bigger and better, hopefully, because it's
Sick,
not
dude.
as much space as I would want in a perfect world, but it's enough to teach someone how to drive.
Yeah, I mean, you're essentially doing donuts and figure eights when you're teaching someone.
And then we'll get a guy that says, I know how to drive, and we're like, all right, we'll hit this layout. And they're like, oh,
yeah,
what?
hit the man line, bro.
Yeah, exactly.
That's crazy. Okay, so where, like, do you have a website for this too?
Yeah, NorCalDriftAcademy.com.
Okay, cool.
And that has info, pricing,
just sign
all
up
that
there.
stuff. Yeah, and then usually, you can sign up, schedule through. We have an Instagram and stuff too. Usually DM or call, scheduling your times.
Sick, dude.
And so far,
Easy
like I said, we're
peasy.
pretty fresh. We've only been doing it a couple months, but while I've been gone, my boy Doug, one of my teammates, he's like, my partner in the whole thing. He's been keeping it going while I've been gone, and
That's
everything's
awesome.
been going good. And,
What cars do you guys have to
so actually,
rent
my
there?
OG 350Z, that one from Drift Week, that's been going for 7 years on Walmart oil and hopes and dreams and 87 octane.
That's not good marketing. Don't say that. I'm just kidding.
I know. I'm always like, why don't I have no
kidding.
sponsors? I'm like, maybe it's because I run all Walmart and eBay parts. I don't know. But that original Z still going 7 years deep, and then I got another G35 that's set up simple. They both just have rack spacers, coils, handbrakes. And then I also have an SC300, which is actually one of our original street cars from back in the day. I ended up getting it in a trade for like a CTSV and sold it to a buddy. But that thing's got like PBM knuckles and like a geared auto diff and like some cool parts on
Just
it.
the NAJZ.
Yeah, NA2JZ
Fuck yeah.
W58, and it's a hoot to drive. That's a super fun car, especially with a little angle
Things
on
are
it.
heavy.
Yeah, not too bad.
Aren't they like 4,000 or 5,000 pounds almost?
They're not that much. The doors weigh a lot, but that's about it.
Oh, they're long.
It's a Supra, man. It's basically a Supra.
That's
Same
true.
chassis. But yeah, so those, no, they're good cars. And I'm not big on weight thing. Like I don't gut my cars if I, like a couple 100 pounds. You aren't going to notice that, in my opinion.
Well, as a beginner anyways, you're definitely not
and
going
like
to
if
notice
anything,
it,
it's
so
give you a
didn't
little more
really
grip,
matter.
get you going a little faster on them used tires. You need that extra weight to get you
Yeah,
going.
well, hey, air the tires up a little bit more. It'll be
Yeah.
fine. Hell yeah. Well, if anyone, I'll leave the link to that in the description if anyone from California watching
Yeah, I
didn't know
appreciate it.
about that. How many people are you usually taking on per month for that?
Right now we're Saturdays and Sundays, so usually weekends. So we'll take, if me and my partner are both there, we can do 4 people in a day.
Oh, wow.
4 students,
Okay.
yeah, each take 2 students.
Is there a
usually.
cap to it? Like, you can only take so many
No.
people per class or whatever?
Yeah, we try to keep it to like 2 drivers per instructor, to kind of keep it pretty
Oh, okay, that's
pretty
good.
hands-on, because I know a lot of drifting schools, they'll kind of do it in like a bigger class setting, but that kind of, it's a pretty intimate thing, getting in a car with someone and having them.
Well, not even that. Like if they're normally fairly pricey for like to actually go out and learn, especially if you're renting a car too. So if you're not giving them that one-on-one time that they're expecting and paying for,
absolutely,
then that could cause some issues later on down the road.
And that's where I feel like a benefit of always been such a budget driver. Our price point's pretty low compared to everyone else.
How much does it cost if you want to share?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so a full day with a car included, tires, fuel, just literally arrive and drive is $800.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah,
that's not that bad at all.
When you consider tires and all
and that's how many hours of track time?
That's for 6 hours.
Jesus, okay.
But obviously you got to let the cars cool down, tires, change tires. But but you're still, the class sizes are so low, you get quite a bit of driving in for that. And and we'll take people. You don't even have to know how to drive a stick. We'll teach you how to drive a stick, everything. So we've had a lot of male students, female students. We've had a lot of couples do it together. So it's been
just
really
for
fun
reference.
so far.
I mean, you're on average going to get maybe 4 hours of track time at a normal event.
Yeah.
Unless it's like
And
just
that's-
some
and
raw
that- and
dog
like,
event
yeah,
that's
and
going
that's like-
sunshine or sun up to sundown. But
Yeah,
like,
4 hours is a lot. Like a regular track day, actual time burning out and the tires spinning. Maybe an hour of actual. Because that's what I think I'll bring up streetwise too. That was what's cool about that is like I said, you go to an 8-hour track day, you're burning out for maybe an hour. We'd be up there in the mountains, for 4 or 5 hours. And we're running straight up and, and we're
it's
there
nonstop,
for 5 hours and we're burning tires for 3.5 of it, in the rain.
oh, you gotta tell me a little bit about that. So where did the street drifting and mountain drifting aspect of it even start for you and the whole crew, and why do you continue it, I guess?
So it kind of, that's kind of how it all started, I remember even first getting into, the first time I ever slid in a car was in like I think an S197 Mustang or maybe a New Edge, and it was with, I'm like 14 or something, and the guy driving is like a sprint car driver, and he comes out on the road and kicks it out, sweeps it back, and I'm like, sweeps it back across the highway, and I'm like, dude, that felt crazy, but like he had control of that, like that was super cool. And then I met my buddy Doug, who's my partner in the drift school and my teammate, and he was wild. He'd be in a 2003. He still has the truck. It's all straight axled and rock crawler now. But his parents' stock 2003 GMC Sierra 1500, 4-wheel drive, and we'd be hitting like cloverleaf, like 270-degree off ramps to go to the mall and stuff, and just full lock around the whole thing. And me and my buddies are just like, dude, this is the coolest thing ever.
The what?
We're being back industrials. And he's coming over these crests at like 60 miles an hour, and we're like, dude, this is wicked. So that just started like the bug, and that turned into us getting cars, and hitting off ramps and doing donuts, and that translated into, I finally met my buddy John, a couple years later, who he was kind of like in the Sacramento scene. And so he knew how to, like, they all had 240s. They knew how to, like, actually drive. We were just kind of, some weekend warriors, kids messing around. And he taught me how to, like, use a handbrake, link corners, actually really, really drift, And from there, it was on, And,
so wait, in the beginning, you were just, like, ripping up mountain roads, no handbrake.
Yeah, and like more even in town, just like just hitting off ramps, doing donuts in parking lots.
That's kind of impressive, actually.
Kids, yeah, and then John kind of taught us how to really drive, and that kind of which made me led to me going to my first track event, and really, getting the bug for it and kind of getting the addiction. But and then like I said, we were in a rural area, and we grew up, we ride dirt bikes on the road. We could get away with quite a bit. And one of my buddies, Cody, actually, the one who was on this trip with us, he was from up in like the more rural kind of part. And he was like, oh, dude, like, actually, so our main spot, like the good street spot, the kind of legendary one, was we originally had a drag racing spot way like up past it. And that was, we're young kids, we're starting to build fast cars. I had like a Camaro, so we're up there drag racing. And he was the one that showed us that road. But then one of our buddies was kind of getting into drifting, so he started sliding the road on the way up there. And then when we all started getting into it, we're like, okay, this road is like wicked, because it's like in the rain, it's like a 1:30 run of probably 10 corners, like back to back, just bangers. Like and it's on a uphill. So going up is like super, slows you down a little bit. It's honestly really easy to drive, which was why it was good for people starting out. Even,
uphill.
Yeah, uphill, super wide, super slick, forgiving corners, and so for tandeming, it's just epic, And then downhill, like the real men go downhill, because downhill is a whole other ball game because it's pretty steep. So starting off, there's like one or two of us. Me and John are like the only ones going downhill. And then, now, as homies progress, there's 3, 4, 5 of us. We're all tandeming. John's pushing me down the hill and stuff, and it's getting more wild. And then,
how do y'all find these spots? Just driving around randomly?
Our buddy knew this one from growing up there, and, just driving around. There's a lot of woods, there's an art to finding spots, but it's hard, and people always, where's this spot? Where's this spot? And you're like, can't give you my spots,
Yeah, like how do you control traffic and stuff? Like, do you just wing it? Or you have got somebody up top and bottom?
So this road, and it's a kind of a bigger road, like more major road too, but kind of out in the sticks. And so there'd be a little bit of traffic, but it's kind of a tweaky area too. So it's like if you see someone up there, and we always go at night and in the rain. That's like when it's raining, everybody, knows it's time to go out. But it's kind of like if someone's out on this road at like, 10, 11 o'clock or later, they're probably doing something worse than us. They're probably...
That's fair.
And like, when we get locals, they'd stop. Like, give us a thumbs up, do a burnout, like having a good time. So every once in a while you get people pissed off. And a couple times I had to had the cops called is usually because, I'll be honest, we don't shut it down, which is probably pretty dangerous. But the guy in front, like you're looking for headlights, And so we had over because someone's coming down, and the first car goes around them, and the whole train, like 8-car train goes around them, and then they call the cops. That's the only time we've had.
That's gotta scare the life out of those people.
And I get it, but it's knock on wood.
And by the way, I have to throw this out there. I do not condone street drifting, but this is a great story, and I want to make sure it's told and shared.
Don't try this at home or whatever.
Yeah.
Be smart. I don't know.
Do as we say, not as we do.
Certain stuff, like, if there's days, because, we go out and, like, film some cool stuff. And during the daytime and certain stuff, we have radios and we'll spot stuff and try to be safe when we can. But, yeah, that's, as a kid and, growing up, it's dangerous once you learn how to drive, because then you feel like, once you have that control, because then you want to.
Does it not feel wrong to do all of this? Like, and now that you obviously know how to drift, you have a fucking school that teaches people. So now you have a business on top of it that, has to uphold a certain standard.
Yeah.
And then, you're going to drift events, drift weeks. Like, does it not feel shitty kind of still doing it?
Yeah, I think maybe I'm just kind of blind to it because I haven't messed up yet and hurt, like I as bad as
no major wrecks this whole time.
No, like major wrecks, like, but all within like homie puts into a guardrail, homies we hit each other. We've never affected anyone else.
So it's never been any like civilian
no
or
outside
just
collateral damage. It's all
that's
been,
good.
Yeah. So
we
have a pretty good,
actually.
and that's after years. So I'd like to say we're pretty good.
Hell, Adam Mills, he couldn't even drive
a
Porsche down a road without getting totaled by a truck.
Yeah, but so there's an art to it, but we've also been very lucky, and like I said, it's pretty stupid in some instances, but so as a kid, you come to a canyon road and you shut your lights off so you can see if you can see anyone coming, and then get after it. But that's also, there's some bad ones too. There is some really dumb stuff. Like there's some videos of us running this pretty crowded river canyon by our house. And there's a follow cam with my buddy, one of my like kind of younger buddies, who he's became a really good driver. I kind of turned him into a monster, I feel like, almost. And he's behind me chasing me in that same G35 I was talking about, borrowing it from our buddy. Our buddy's in his passenger seat and he's just letting him rip it. We're ripping this 2-lane canyon road, and you see as the cars come around, it's daylight. And there's kind of an art to it. It's really weird, street drifting like in the daylight on a 2-lane road, because on your outside, when you're in the outside, you can just run your outside in your lane. But if you get to a spot where, obviously there's an ideal drift line, that puts you in the other lane if you're looking at it like it's a track. So you got to take as much of that lane as you can, as far ahead as you can see. You have to be in that lane, but you got to be not far enough that if you see a car come, you have to be able to gather it up and get back in your lane. So there's like a weird kind of art to it. As there's a video of him chasing me, and you see him,
You're still in the rain during the day too,
yeah,
right? It's all during the rain?
Usually, but for the most part. Because the dry is, a lot of people don't get too. The dry in the street is no
Grippy.
joke. Like, you know, and that's funny.
For anyone that hasn't watched any of the drift, sorry to cut you off,
Yeah.
but in the Drift Appalachia episodes, like even people with 700 horsepower, 600 horsepower in their cars are bumping their 245, 255s up to about 80 psi.
Oh yeah,
Because it is so grippy on the
Yeah.
street,
And
especially coming back uphill.
and that's what I always tell people is like,
yeah.
you know, and that's why I don't like. I don't like drifting the track in the rain as much. Like obviously, you know, it happens, you do it, whatever. But it's just so greasy and like always so slow and rough. If I'm at the track, I want it to be dry. But in the, you know, on the streets, the rain is nice because it's more consistent. You know, it's a road. It's not covered in tire dust and oil and dirt and from all the dirt drops. You know, it's real consistent and nice. But you know, but a dry track surface versus a dry street surface, such a different ball game. And that's like events like, so we did I don't know if did you see there was the Utah toge they did? Yeah, Ultimate Drifting Challenge. Got to go out to that because Bobby's one of my buddies there. And I was stoked on that because I'm like, that's my game. Like, you know, like I drift in the street. And it's at like 9,000 feet elevation too. Like, so the cars are, you know, struggling to breathe.
Yeah.
And I knew what was going on. I was like, I came up on, you know, 15, 16, 17s, like, you know, beater street tires, you know, and everybody's on their 265s. And I'm like, you guys are tripping. And I just watched everybody not even be able to run a line, like, you know, just straightening out the whole time. And I'm on my 205, 55, 16s, just having a ball, you know, having a great time. And I'm like, it's bad. There's videos of me. I'm on a 16-inch tire on one side, an 18-inch tire on the other side, mismatched wheels. Like, I'll blow all my tires off and I'll start mismatching all the survivors out of my sets.
Oh, hell
And run
no.
that. Like, and like I was, you know, first seeing the Chelsea to Nofa stuff where it's like, oh, you got to run the same tire every time, you know, so you get consistent and this and that. I'm like, well, yeah, if you have money, like sounds like a good program, but like, you know, I don't. So I'm gonna run whatever I find behind the Les Schwab in the tire bin because that's still where I get my tires. I go to tire shops and I get takeoffs. That's, you know, that's still what I run to this day. And I have a great time when I drive a lot of laps.
Because, like, obviously, I understand where Denofa's coming from.
Yeah,
but,
no,
like, I also get where you're coming from as well. But also, new tires feel so good,
They
dude.
do.
It's
They do,
almost
but
like an addiction.
They don't feel $280 a pair good.
I mean, I get that. I can understand that. But what are you paying $280 a pair for? Right?
I mean, what do you pay for it?
Okay, I guess that would be. Oh no, I'm just my math.
I mean, let's say 240.
I'm sorry,
you know,
that was a fuck up on my part.
A cheap 265, you know, 120.
Yeah,
bucks a tire,
yeah.
I'll say for a Kenda or something.
That's
but
fair.
You know,
Gotta try them Zagnovas,
hey,
man.
and my fronts, I run Walmart, cheap as I can get, 50, 60 bucks a tire, some Waterfalls or Westlake.
That's scary. That's actually scary. I would 100%, if I'm running shit tires, at least put decent tires up front.
And I've always had, I hate when people blame their front tires. So I'm like, and I was also coming from like a stock Z stuff, you know, I'd always leave just rack spacers on my Z's, you know, so all your front geometry is still the same, right? Because then you have super good front grip. As soon as you start changing your Ackerman and doing big angle kits, you lose a lot. Like the cars become super understeer happy, I feel like.
To an extent.
But
dial it in right.
Yeah, because that's like,
you can get what you want.
I'll run my front tires to cords, and I'll still be jamming in the front of 10-car trains with fine front grip. No problems at all. You know, and it's just, you know, people always
the
come
last
up and they
thing,
look at my car
the
and they're
last
like,
thing
"What
I
are you
want is for my front grip to go missing. Rear grip is manageable. You can just drive the car with the throttle, but if you lose the steering, that freaks me the fuck out, dude. But there's also like the people that argue, because like you'll see that video of I don't know who posted it, but it's like a completely bald set of like some Accelera, I think it was 651s on the front, and he's like, I don't even want to change these because the car drives so good without the front grip. And I'm like, my brain just doesn't comprehending the lack of front grip.
Yeah, and another argument I could say there why it might work for me better too is because, you know, I feel like a lot of it's the ratio between the grip in your front and your rear, right? And I'm usually running not much grip in the rear because I'm running used tires and stuff like that. And I run,
See that,
you know, unlike these days, it's funny, if I'm doing a comp, I'll like save like every once in a while Skip will give me maybe a nice pair of Kendos or something, or some Acceleras that he has. And I'll save those and run those just for a comp. Just because when I know I need to be fast. And I won't even qualify them or nothing.
I get that. I mean, we all do that.
Yeah, I go to enter, go to faint into the first corner, and I'm like, the car doesn't even move. And I'm like, oh, God. Like, you know, because I'm not used to what they feel like. But that goes back to, you know, running the different tires. I feel like it can also, in a weird way, help you become a more adaptive driver. Because, you know, obviously, if you would not, you know, make your car, you know, set up how you like it, and you know what it does, and you can really dial in and perfect what you do. But if you can drive anything, I feel like that's what, you know.
I don't think you're setting yourself up to be able to drive absolutely anything, though.
But
if I put you in my car as gripped up as possible, you wouldn't be able to enter the first time. That's for sure. It would not. You wouldn't be able to comprehend
have times
it.
where my car's set up like yours too. You know, I've ran my car with Kendos in the front, Pergies in the rear. You know, I know what it feels like. You just got to drive it a little harder.
I mean, yeah, that is true. You just drive it harder, but
yeah, like I said, when I grip my car up, it feels.
But
like,
going from
like
such a
like
flowy, like loose ass setup to like a machine, like on its full tilt.
Yeah,
I couldn't do that. That would throw me off
different streets
so
different
fucking
freaks,
bad.
You know, that's like I said, I think I just do it because I'm a budget guy. You know, it's what I've always done. It's how I drive so much. If I bought new tires, I couldn't afford to drive half as much as I do. You know, it's just kind of
argument there.
It's just how it's been. You know, it's how I've always done it, and I've just been. You know, I've never been a super. You know, I do comps and I like to compete and that kind of fun stuff, but I've always just drove for fun and drove want to drive as much as I can. So I think that's kind of what it just stemmed from.
Well, back on the topic of the whole mountain drifting thing, you mentioned you have arguably the biggest illegal like street tow, I guess, organization, right? Sort of.
Definitely wouldn't call it an organization.
Or
it's alleged. It's all
meetup.
It's all allegedly.
Yeah, it's all alleged, but
yeah.
Arguably the biggest in the country. You said. Right?
I mean, yeah, because I mean,
why though? Like, how does it make it that? What's the?
Because, you know, where else do you see, you know, 15, 20 cars on a mountain road in the middle of the night?
I think that's the point. You're not supposed to.
I know, but it's really cool when you do. And it's like, it's funny. And you know, and it's like a super, some of these kids have never even been to it. You know, every once in a while, someone never even been to a track. And then you get them bring their buddies, you know, and like, and even some of our buddies that don't know about drifting, and they're riding with us going, dude, this is the craziest thing I've ever. And it's just like, it's so hard to capture. And we've had a couple media guys over the years and some pretty good videos, and we have hours and hours of, you know, in-car phone videos, but that doesn't do anything really that much justice. And like to capture how cool it is to just be hanging out with your buddies and just jam for 45 minutes till we're like, oh, okay, we'll chill for 15, 20 minutes, hang out, you know, do whatever, you know.
It's crazy that that people feel the need to risk it, I guess, for the street drifting. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. I love street drifting is fun, and I'm not one that does it very often, nor have I a lot in my life. But it's just crazy to me that people will risk it. They just don't care. But I guess in the setting you're talking about too, it's like
it's
bizarre, hard to say no.
It's bizarre how lax it is, and but it's hard. It's like I said, you can't just find that anywhere. Like, we've got super lucky with this spot, and I can't believe it lasted as long as it did. And it's like, it's kind of getting a little iffy these days. Had a couple issues, you know, but just years of being able to do that. And it's almost like we're kind of in disbelief while we're doing it. That like,
how does it work? Especially being in California too, because you have all of the car laws or like whatever you want to talk about with it.
The more I've seen, especially traveling around, I feel like then, you know, out here you have inspections in most states, different stuff.
I don't hear specifically, but
like East Coast stuff, all the rusty stuff too. But, you know, you have inspections and this and that. I always ask people, you know, I'm you know, a car guy through and through, so I'm always, you know, asking people about different laws and their states and, you know, how things go down. And it seems like you kind of get nickel and dimed everywhere you go. And in California, it's really only smog. And, you know, if you're into cars, you know a way around it, you know, kind of through
I
the
wouldn't
scene.
say it's really only small. There's a lot of problems with California. That's not for this
but it's like,
podcast, but
I've been, yeah, we live, that's this whole trip too. It's like, you know, people, oh, where are you guys from? And you got to say, oh, California, you know, but like,
you just start saying out west.
We're from Northern California, but like the good part, like, you know, we're almost a little more like Southern Oregon. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard of state of Jefferson, but it's like, it's the 51st state where they're taking the top chunk of Northern California and the bottom chunk of Oregon and making like a dirty redneck state, you know, because we're, you know, kind of some dirty rednecks to a point, you know, we're kind of country kids from the mountains a little bit.
That's so funny, dude.
But yeah, and it's like, I've been pulled over in my 240 with my truck manifold sticking through the hood, and the cop's like, oh, cool, what motor you got in this thing, you know, like.
It's really that vastly different from south to north?
Not south to north, but I drive 45 minutes to Sac, and it's the city and it's the hood, and like, you know.
Oh, okay.
And
so
that's
just
where
big city
so
issues.
yeah, but and like I said, that's, you know, and all this, one of the original spots where I was taught to drive, all the Sac kids kind of, it was a little closer to Sac, so they'd all kind of come up there, and it kind of got blown up, and the cops started coming, you know. No spot lasts forever, but you try to make it last as long as you can, kind of. But yeah, but I still say, even that, like, the cops, if they see you're going out into the mountains, like, you go to a, you know, like a big one's like a lake, you know, for all the kids want to find spots, you know. You go on Google Maps and look at lakes way out in the middle of nowhere, and if they have parking lots, that kind of thing, you know. That's a good way to find a spot. And if a cop sees you making an effort to go out where nobody is to drift, they respect that a little bit. They really do. And that's why I tell people I've never seen a car towed from the mountains. I've heard them threaten, oh, next time we come out here, we're going to tow a car, this and that, you know, whoop-de-whoop. But they at least appreciate that you're not doing it somewhere where there's people and like causing a scene and just doing it for, you know, it for, you know, destructive purposes, I guess I should say.
I get that. What is the worst case of run-in with the law that you've had then?
I've been very lucky. Like, I've gotten a bunch of speeding tickets for doing like 5, 10 over and like on street. Like, usually when I get in trouble, it's for when I'm not even doing anything that bad. I did go to jail back when I was in college at Chico. I went to jail for doing donuts at like a car meet, and that was when I was already like into drifting, like, and everyone's, you know, doing burnouts at this car meet, and everyone's like, oh, you know, go show them what's up, this and that, because they knew like how I could drive and shit. And I'm like, no, like, I'm not even wasting my time with that, you know, like, that's nonsense, like, whatever. And then like people are doing burnouts for like an hour. I'm like, all right, I guess it's cool, like, fine, whatever. And you know, may have gone a little excessive, but then, you know, on the way out, got pulled over, cop took me to jail, you know, that kind of thing. And I had another one try to get me from a reckless. We're doing like a memorial for a buddy, and where we all did massive burnouts in front of his old house because he was a huge car and diesel guy. And then I was like leaving the function like an hour later, and the cop pulled me over like, oh, you did a burnout. I'm like, nope, I definitely just left the dude's house just now, and I beat that one in court and stuff. So, but yeah, I've been like, I don't know how much. I'm probably incriminating myself here quite a bit.
No, I was just curious how bad it's gotten.
I have a commercial license and shit, believe it or not. Too.
Wow.
Like, I should drive truck and everything.
Jesus Christ.
So yeah, there's a fine line you gotta, you know, walk sometimes. And like I said, I don't, you know, it's not a good idea, but if you're smart about it and, you know, you.
What's the most common like run-in that you get with the law? Like, how's it usually go? Usually it's, you know, I feel like I've only had cops show up while I'm drifting, like not actively drifting, but while we're hanging out at the drift spot, you know, they'll always catch us in between times usually, which is nice. And usually they just kind of know what's going on kind of, and, you know, they'll be like, all right, like, you know. You caught me.
Yeah, but it's like, but if they don't catch you doing anything, it's like they can't do anything. You know, so usually they'll maybe try to like write down some license plates, or, you know, and they'll always give us like a warning, you know, and maybe take some pictures and say, if we see you out here again, you know, but they know if you aren't doing anything, they can't really do nothing.
That's crazy.
For the most part. You know, I'm sure if someone really wanted to push an issue, like, and I have quite a bit of respect for law enforcement. You know, a lot of people like hate cops, stuff like that. I respect law enforcement quite a bit, you know.
I do as well.
And they'll usually be cool. Like, we had a night where it's, you know, they pulls up, and we almost had a cop go for a ride along one night, a really cool cop, like super cool. And this is the kind of good old boy mountain stuff a little bit, you know. But and, you know, he tells us, you know, he bullshits with us for a sec. Was like, oh, you guys like have spotters up and down the road, you know. And we're like, oh yeah, of course we do, you know, sure. and, you know, kind of asks us just what's going on a little bit. And then we're like, all right, yeah, well, like, we were just about to head out anyways. He's like, all right, yeah, have a good night, you know, whatever. And, you know, and there's 1J cars with no taillights. Nobody has tag. Like, you know, I like to keep my stuff tagged. I try to keep it where if I get pulled over, I'm legit, you know, because that just helps your cause. And, but yeah, where cops will let stuff slide. But then there's also been times, you know, where they don't, and where they pull people over and try to give them a real hard time. And, you know, the cops will always lie to try to get you to admit to stuff, you know, that kind of thing. That's the oldest trick in the book. But, you know, it's like the whole Bay Area thing, no face, no case, you know. They can't put your face in that driver's seat doing that, and they can't really do much.
I mean, I guess that is fair. Do you have like, I know you've done a lot of explaining around why it's still safe and like the different variables you guys take, but to anyone watching that still might be like, that's still almost a takeover, what do you say to that?
I mean, that's like,
I don't believe that's true.
It's all a gray area, and like the takeover thing's super funny because like I'm from California, right? We grew up right next to the Bay Area, so like I remember when I was a kid, when I was, you know, 16, 17, 18 probably, we used to go to the big take, like in the Bay, and like the Bay is a whole different thing. Like it is a cultural experience, and like, you know, they've been doing that stuff since the 80s, you know, and it's like, you know, it's the whole mob mentality thing, and it was pretty cool back then. It was just getting the borderline of it being like kind of, you know, real destructive almost and like bad, but there's, you know, and it comes back to thing like the secret ingredients crime kind of, you know, a little extra spice almost. But and it is like, you know, it's a takeover, but I think that's the difference is between doing it in an intersection, which, you know, doing an intersection in a big city like has its own perks, you know, it's dangerous and cool, whatever, you know, yada yada. But, you know, when you start lighting cars on fire and like fist fighting people, like that's where you kind of lose
crippling people from booting them across the road.
Yeah, well that's if you get hit by a car, you're a fucking idiot. Like, you know, you got
like that shit like, boggles my mind.
We used to go and we're like, you know, the people's girlfriends trying to go and stuff, and we're like, no, like this is like, we barely feel safe here, and we are like watching our own ass. So like, you need to, you know, no one's old lady is allowed to come. You're not trying to be responsible for anybody than yourself, and you need to like run and hop events if you need to and do what you need to do, you know, because cops come with tear gas, you know, all kinds of crazy stuff. But that was just us being kids, like, you know, like, all right, we got to go see what this is about. But, where were we going with that? You're
takeovers.
Yeah, so, like, in the street, as far as us being, like, a takeover kind of thing. And that's where I think the difference is if you're going out and, you know, going to do it out where no one can see. And you're not trying to, you know, you're doing it just for yourself almost, you know, for your own and your buddy's personal fulfillment. And that's, like, even, like, some Drift Week stuff, you know. I've seen where, like, you know, we go to a meetup on Drift Week, and I've seen, you know, I've seen Chelsea DeNofa fucking street drift down a hill, like in the middle of Oregon, you know? It's like, is that a takeover? You know? I've seen the Drift Week guys ripping donuts like a historical monument, you know, stuff like that. It's like, where do you draw the line? Like, we all want to have fun. You know,
we've all got a story of street drifting.
Yeah,
so.
What's it hurting, you know? What's your intentions? You know, it's all kind of a gray area. So I think
the stipulation that most people would have, though, is those guys, and yes, they may do it occasionally, and it's like once every year maybe. You're doing it pretty often.
Yeah.
So I think that's the stipulation that most people may have an issue with, is just you're making it a repetitive thing to where it's now drawing a crowd, and I think that can almost hinder drifting and the growth for it by there being so much crowd drawn to street drifting. And I may be totally wrong about this too. I'm just like spitballing.
Yeah, no, I just, you gotta have a.
I'm sure plenty of people have said this shit to you too.
Oh yeah, like, but I was like, even like, it's weird, man. And at least where we're at, you know, like we're in the hills, you know, like people there don't even know what drifting is, you know, like it's. You know, country folks, old people, tweakers.
Truly believe y'all are not endangering anyone's lives. Like, nothing crazy is really happening.
Yeah, not. But like, and the most dangerous thing you can do is get in your car and drive on the highway. You know, like that's the most odds you have of dying. Any given day is getting in your car and driving.
Especially
on the
out there.
And I'd argue us doing what we're doing doesn't really change those odds. You know, because we're pretty. You know, we're pretty skilled, have very good control, and you know, and are as safe about it as we can be. Don't get me wrong. There's do plenty. You know, I when I was a kid, I first got my license, didn't know how to drive. I did so much stupid stuff and almost killed me and my friends so many times. Look back, just like what an idiot. To where now it's like, and normal driving, I'm like a grandpa. Like it's on or it's off, But yeah. So it's it's where do you draw the line with it? But
do you think it'll ever stop, or do you want to? Yeah, will you always continue to street drift?
I think we will, because it's for us, like it's almost like a cultural thing, and it's not like and it's a pretty tight knit group of just our kind of area, but it's spread throughout the kind of state that there's guys that just hit the track, and that kind of thing, and then there's kids that I feel like it's mainly just more kind of poorer kids growing up that they couldn't afford to go to the track, or they didn't know how to go to the track, and that's what they did.
From my point of view, I would see nothing but opportunity there. Instead of just continuing the street drifting, why not start your own toge? Make it legit. And I mean, if the audience is already growing for it, and it's needed in that area of the country,
yeah, and we've
why
talked
not just
about
do it right?
We've talked about it for sure, but it comes to the thing where it was never like, it just started from just buddies going out and having fun, and it's such it's like a low overhead, like low impact kind of deal where it's just, 10 of us meet up at the parking lot and we go drive, and that's kind of what I'd start.
That's the hard part to let go of.
Let go of is how easy it is, and that's why I started bitching at my buddies where it's like, you guys need to go to the track. Like, I get that you want to just go put $40 in your fuel tank and go drive all night, and how that seems way better than going and spending $400 and going to Thunder Hill in the middle of the summer and, having a long day. But there's a place for the track. The track is going to elevate your driving to another level, being on a dry surface and going faster and getting into third gear, because that's where I took that and I kind of ran with it where I love fast stuff, like big road courses. The faster the better, because that's makes it cooler. Second gear's one thing, third gear's a whole other ball game, fourth gear's a whole other ball game on top of that, and you got to push yourself, and you can only push yourself so much on the street, and taking it to an environment where you really can not worry about anything is huge, and it's a huge benefit. So I totally preach both sides of it. The street stuff is just super near and dear to my heart because it's just some of the best times of my life.
I can see that. I get it. I can't condone it, but I get it. Now, why not just sim for seat time? I have to ask that.
Honestly, totally viable. It works. No, I would never argue in a million years. I've seen it time and time again. I've had kids on my door that have hardly driven at all, and they're sim kids.
Yeah, we just talked about it before we started this.
They are raw drivers, and it works. I just talk shit because I don't, I was like, where's the street credit in that, dude? I learned by crashing into my.
He said street cred.
I learned by crashing into my friends and guardrails and totaling my car, man. You learned on a freaking video game? Come on, man.
God, that was too fucking funny, dude. He said, "Where's the street cred in that?"
So that's what it comes to. It's and I'm super accepting. I love the sport. I love helping anyone and get into it, and whatever way you got to do to drive, I'm there for it. I love the sport more than anything, and I just want to see people drive. I'm huge in any of the young kids, especially because I feel like kind of generations are kind of falling off. In my opinion now. Even
iPad kids,
even ours. It's it slowly goes downhill. But and less kids are into cars and stuff like that. So I love seeing young kids. I've had tons of young kids who I've, gotten into cars and driving and gotten to the track, and I love doing it. I love seeing it, and love sharing how much joy I've gotten out of this with other people. But, where was I going with that?
It was originally about the sim.
Yes, sim. But, yeah, so it's whatever you got to do to get into it, that's fine. But, yeah, I just... something cooler.
What is your experience with the sim? Do you even like it? Just as a tool to use?
So I remember the first time I drove one, I was already pretty seasoned driver, and I'm like, this is a lie. This isn't, this isn't. There's no way this is a real car, But after And some people pick it up faster than others. You know, I've had buddies, you know, usually people play like, you know, video games more kind of stuff where they're 30 minutes in, you know, they can kind of run a line pretty good. Dude, I was like 5, 6, 10 hours, like just like struggling, you know, to finally, and then after that, like get to the feel where I'm like, all right, this feels like a regular car. Like my inputs are pretty similar. Still way worse than driving than me driving in person, but I can, you know, kind of get down, you know, and run a little tandem or something. But and then but that was once I actually finally got a sim, and you know, a decent Thrustmaster setup and started playing a little bit. But I'm fortunate enough to where I was like, I didn't really play it because I was always driving in real life. So I'm like,
not a bad problem.
Not a bad problem to have. So I eventually sold it, you know.
Yeah.
And because I was like,
I think if you invested in a proper setup, you would get the more feel that you were looking for.
Nice.
No, I know, but it's still Thrustmaster, just like Logitech. It's like all you know, just budget.
It's belt drive. Come on.
Well, yeah, that's better. But
like my setup, I love my setup. It was cool.
I've driven some pretty gnarly ones, and like, I get it at that point. It's like, all right, this kind of feels pretty close.
Yeah, or diff. Yeah.
I'm missing a couple senses, but it's all there.
Yeah.
So I think you've probably. I know your budget is fuck, but
I've driven like a
with
VR
the amount that you've
setups,
driven
like,
in the mountains, like you probably could have bought a Baller Sim Magic setup.
Oh yeah, 100%. No, and it's super valid. Like kids that want to, you know, it's just not my thing, not for me. But it is 100% an amazing tool. But I think it's kind of weenie too, still.
Ooh. Well, if you want to be weenie, you can also save some percentage off at SimHQ, by the way. That code's in the description, but just want to throw that out there.
It works. I will never. I'm a realistic guy, and I will never deny that it absolutely works. You know, there's kids.
But it's weenie.
There's sim kids. There's sim.
But you're a puss.
There's sim kids that will outdrive me any day of the week until we go to a real road.
I don't know, man. I've driven some of the toge maps and stuff in Assetto, and they're pretty realistic. With the off camber and like everything too.
The grip level changes.
Yeah, I'm sure the grip level is definitely gonna be different, but it's pretty world. As far as the visuals and the camber and the just geometry of everything. It works. But yeah. I forgot what I was gonna say after that. But well, yeah, that was cool. Definitely suggest playing the sim more. Well, I guess you got rid of it, so you can't really do that. But get another one. Try the sim more. Maybe start a real toge, you know.
The real toge would be
I think that would be.
About it, but that's a very hard, especially in California.
Just do one a year.
Location, like
one a year, and then don't even talk about the stuff y'all do on your own.
Yeah.
Like just let that be for the boys. Do one real toge a year, because then you'll satisfy the town up there. And you'll bring so much money to them.
But that's getting a permit to do that legally. You know, that's.
Well, I bet that would be
you'd have to go to
go
to a poor county, find the right road that wants the money, and actually it's a hard thing to it's a hard thing to obtain. Yeah. It really is. But yeah, and that's kind of where it got to with our thing is it started off kind of small, you know, just a couple of us, and then more it's just buddies of buddies all getting into it, you know, and then it got to the point where it's like, all right, we have too many cars up here, like, you know, like
we gotta chill.
We need to kind of
split up.
Like we need to like gatekeep it more now, you know, because before it was like any. Buddy, you got a car, like, come on out. But they got to the point where it's like, all right. Like,
so we're not dropping the coordinates in the description?
Hell no, not even close. And, like, we've had,
Jamie, pull it up.
But, yeah, so we've had, like, or even, like, see a random kid up there, like, oh, like, someone told me to go here. And we're like, don't ever come back here. Like, like, get out of here. So
damn, so you've had to run people off like that?
Here, every once in a
while. That's crazy.
You get your wrong buddy that wants to start running his mouth, and talking about stuff. So like, there's a kind of a balance to all of it. Like I said, it's a super dynamic situation. Well,
although I don't condone it, I'm glad you're taking the steps you are to keep things as safe as possible.
Because like I said, no spot lasts forever. So we try to do everything we can to keep it as long as we can, and that's
there's some internet wizards out there. They might figure it out after this.
Some buddies are like, you shouldn't even post videos of it, this and that. And we're like, yeah,
I mean, I would probably agree with them, but you're gonna do what you want. You're a grown adult.
Yeah. We're a bunch of dummies.
Well, if you could, what would your best piece of advice be for anyone getting into drifting?
I'm big G35 350Z, you know, best, you know, you can get one for 2, 3, 4 grand.
Keep in mind where you're at.
Yeah.
You're the only place in the country that has Z's and G's that cheap.
We grew up wheeling and
I might
dealing,
be
you know.
wrong.
It's all about finding the right deal. And the more knowledgeable
yeah.
you become, the better deal you can get. You know, it's all about immersing yourself in it, kind of. But, yeah, do that. Get a car that's almost stock and that you can set up to drive well, because it doesn't take much to make a car drive well. And then just drive that and then build your car while you're driving that. 100%. And just go to the track. Drifters are some of the coolest people. You know, I've gotten, you know, taken tons of people like from drag racing and off-road racing and all different forms and gotten them into drifting. And they're all like, man, this is so much, like, it's cheaper. The people are better. It's less competitive, you know. It's super cool. That's actually one of our guys. The craziest guy on the toge run, Mudslayer. I don't know if you've ever seen, there's a 68 Camaro, like first gen Camaro drift car with, and it's on a C6 chassis. Graphed on their C6 chassis with a 408 twin turbo E85, like 800 horse LS, with a front mount T56 and a quick change rear, like full FDF Mega Mantis in the front. And this dude, we met him. He has like 67 Camaros on Hummer chassis on like 42s with like rear mount fucking blown big blocks on alcohol that he like does mud bogs with. And he was a street racer too. He's been on Street Outlaws, all that stuff. And we ended up like meeting him. We found out he lived like kind of right up by us and became super good buddies with him. And he's just like the most laid back, chill dude. But you get him in the driver's seat and he's just an animal, just a madman. Like he'd be, you know, he took a stock Z, didn't even put coilovers on it, because people tell you, oh, you can't put Wisefab on a Z with stock coilovers. You can. He made it happen. And he's just backwards down the whole mountain on the guardrail, doobie hanging out his mouth, freaking blown over curbs, just a mat, like
binding dude, everywhere.
Dude,
everything's binding.
No, he's ripping. Dude,
I'm sure he was ripping. He drove straight through it, but it was binding.
He'll be like, no, like, I'm going to take it easy, like, you know, and then he's just dragging every single wall. He's just an absolute madman. And he builds the craziest things. He's like, oh, I found this wrecked Can-Am, and I took another wrecked Can-Am and cut them in half and welded them together in the center and put an LS in the back of it, and, like, just ridiculous. Like, like, you know, like, I'm a hack, and he blows my mind. But he's pretty legit, too, at the same time. Like, his stuff's pretty wild.
Hell yeah.
So he's like,
that's pretty cool.
He's one of our OG homies now, but he's always a good time.
Oh, all right. Well, last question I got for you is the deeper one. Actually, I haven't asked this in forever. If you had the chance to speak to the entire world, what would your one message be?
I'll go with something my dad always used to tell me that always stuck with me, because, you know, he wasn't like a religious person or anything, because he always said, you know, if there's, you know, you're going to choose a God, like, good luck picking the right one, right? But just be a good person just for yourself, so you can feel good about it and treat others how you want to be treated, and just, you know, be a good person because it's the right thing to do. You know, it's not that hard.
Like, simple and easy.
Yep.
I wish people told their kids that more. I feel like that's kind of dropped off.
It's hard. I had a really
treat
good
people
dad.
the way you want to be treated. That seems like a common sense thing. But you ask some fucking 12-year-old or 14-year-old, they're gonna be like, "What are you talking about? I've never heard that in my life."
Yeah, having good parents is important. I had a real good dad, thankfully. He was real hard on us, which, you know, has its own value. But he was still, you know, really good dad.
Read that wheel. Do better. Right behind him. Do better. Anyway, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Well,
I want to give credit to one thing too. We're talking about Richard Avani. I always, you know, I always claim to be, you know, get the most seat time per dollar or whatever, and do the cheapest drift weeks ever or whatever. The only one person I will say that I think drives for cheaper than me is Richard Avani. He's a pro spec driver. Ever heard of him? HP Chasers, and which he's a great guy too. Like, I've hung out with him a bunch. Super, super cool guy. His brother Russ, I seen him at AVS, and he bought like $100 auction Crown Vic automatic, welded the diff, and he's pulling tires off the tire wall AVS and changing them with the Harbor Freight hand changer in the parking lot, and running laps and linking AVS in an automatic Crown Vic. And I was like, that's cheaper than me. Like
That's
I can't,
bigger balls than I got.
you know,
That's
and
for
I'm
sure.
like,
What
that's
the
the
fuck?
only person who I will like say that's cheaper than I drive. Like that's real.
Wow.
That's wild. And now he finally T5 swapped it and stuff, I think. So
That's
he
okay.
shreds it. But that's the thing. It's like, you know, I'll put him against some pro drivers or like, you know, but like good drivers in their fancy cars, and he's going to run a more consistent lap than they are because he's a good driver. And that was another drift week kind of thing too. I remember drift week 4, we went to Hoonigan, which was super cool. Like, and it was like the Compton one that wasn't really as popular. I feel like, you know, kind of not like the main burn yard, but it still was super cool. But and this kind of swings back into the takeover thing too, is watching like pro like level guys and pro level cars try to do like first gear like tight car control stuff was like mind-boggling how bad some people were at it. Like I was like, I know kids from Antioch, some hood kids who've never been to a track in their life that can take a SN95 drop top with a manual and a stock handbrake and run that lot and make it just their bitch and just go crazy and put everyone here to shame. And you guys in your pro cars can't even like do some donuts. It was pretty.
Those
like
cars are a completely different level of monsters, but I get what you're saying, yeah.
You know, but still, like it was pretty wild. But then like Aaron Losey, fantastic driver, like probably one of, you know, Aaron Losey in his big fancy car, running awesome lines. You know, great driving. So it's like, you know, people try to use the car as an excuse sometimes, and it's like, car's a car. You know,
I get it. There's some pretty crazy ones out there, though.
You know, and that's like
that's
the thing. I'll put a 15-inch wheel and an 18-inch wheel on a car and go. You know, and we're at the toge in Utah, and people are scared to drive downhill and scared to drive at night, and we're going downhill at night on mismatched tires.
No headlights. Fuck it.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
But yeah, so it's.
I guess, is there anything else that you wanted to mention about all of, whether it's the school side of things or?
I don't think so. I think it's plugged the school pretty well for the most part. We're definitely open to new drivers. Like I said, all skill levels.
Good.
You know, any demographic.
Cool.
We do.
Well, again, you can always look in the description. I'll leave it down there if you do want to sign up or anything like that. Maybe pressure them into not so much more street drifting. Yeah. Maybe do a legal one if possible. We gotta make it work.
To separate it, you know.
Yeah. Hell yeah, dude. Well, I do want to say thank you for making a stop here and doing an episode with me. It's pretty cool.
No,
share your story.
Yeah, thanks for having me. You know, I feel like I usually got a lot to say, and like I said, you know, drifting's full of a lot of the same opinions. I feel like I have quite a bit of differing ones, you know, to some point, but you know, it's all the same stuff.
Little cuckoo ones, but we get over it.
You know, it's like, you know, we should all be throwing faint entries, you know, and be driving like men, you know. But I'm just, like I said, I'm just cheap. I'm as cheap as they come. So if there's kids like, you know, that can't afford to do stuff the right way, ask me how to do it. You know, like even if you want, you know, shoot me a DM on Instagram. You know, Uncle Seat Time. And, like, I love, you know, people with questions for anything about cars, Z's, all that kind of stuff. I like helping whoever I can, you know, with whatever info I have to get them driving and, you know, let them know that I feel like people are always like, oh, you have to do this and you have to do that, you know, this isn't going to work. And it's like, you don't have, you know, you can get by if you don't have the means, you know. You can get by and still do what you want to do and learn along the way.
Absolutely. So. Well, cool, dude. I really appreciate it. And I've had some good conversation, so this is great. Of course, look below the video. All that stuff is there if you want to get in contact with him. And yeah, thanks again. Grab some merch. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. And of course, we will see you each and every Sunday for a brand new episode.
Staying way up to the ceiling. Trust no bitch, can't catch no feelings. I've been taking long flights from the Bay to Ibiza. Hit home runs, I'm a ball like Jeter. I just want 4, then I leave her. I'm a young pop star, call the boy Justin Bieber. Got a little money if you want, I can teach you. Whole life a movie, you can watch it in theater. Staying way up to the ceiling. Trust no bitch, can't catch no